Is this how I die? After I went through and finished Skyward Sword HD on the Switch, I came to realize I still like the game for having excellent dungeons, cool items, and one of my favorite bosses in the entire series. But if you've played it, you know the second half is bogged down by useless escort missions, tedious tadpole swimming sections, and an overall bunch of padding and stupid shit. But I still like it, even if my playthrough made me waste 30 hours of my life. So after experiencing a Zelda from the Wii era technically, I thought it'd be best to visit a Zelda game I've always wanted to play but never paid much attention to really, which is also from the same era, and that's Twilight Princess. This was announced after Wind Waker, a game that didn't get received too kindly to fans at the time, all due to its cartoonish cel-shaded art style. Of course, everyone loves it nowadays for aging extremely well, but back then, going from Ocarina of Time's somewhat realistic visuals for at least for the N64 hardware to this wasn't very appealing to many in 2002, considering the GameCube was a hot new next-gen console for Nintendo. Miyamoto really wanted to avoid that for the next Zelda installment, and specifically asked to make Twilight Princess more realistic in every sense, to appeal to Western audiences, including real horseback riding. At E3 2004, the game would be revealed in arguably one of the most iconic audience reactions to a video game thing. It was planned to be released next year for the GameCube, but was pushed back to be out later in 2006 as the team was apparently struggling. Because the Wii with codename Revolution was under development, Nintendo thought it was better to release Twilight Princess for the Wii and the GameCube, months in between, but pretty much simultaneously. It's surprising to me how Nintendo would also do this exact same tactic with Breath of the Wild, except with Twilight Princess, the Wii and GameCube versions had a very stark difference. Sure, the Wii had motion controls because it had to, but for some reason the entire game is flipped on the Wii version to compensate for Link holding the sword in his left hand normally. So flipping the game would ensure using the Wii mode in your right hand to swing around your sword wouldn't feel that awkward. So yeah, why not just flip only Link's character model? Nope, just give the entire game a mirror mode. I never understood this at all, but hey, it's still Twilight Princess, I guess. And people grew up with it. In 2016, the game would be remastered for the Wii U, and it's easily regarded as the definitive version of the game, keeping the GameCube's normal non-flipped world, upscaling textures, and including more quality of life enhancements. And all of this was for $50, mind you. Now you'd think I'd played Twilight Princess on Wii U, but no, I decided to just play the GameCube version via emulator, because I don't feel like spending money. So, sorry about 4x3 gameplay, please fire off your complaints in the comments. Please. You know, I'm pretty damn excited to play this game. Twilight Princess has always eluded me in a way. It looks pretty interesting, and even so, people seem to be divided on it, going from such high praise at its E3 reveal to mixed reception nowadays, with most saying it's a flawed experience. I've wanted to see for myself for months, maybe even years, because it stands out to me for a variety of reasons I'll get to in the actual review, despite it having clear similarities to Ocarina of Time. Even if I'm playing the original release, I still make the occasional comparison to the Wii U version. Anyways, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. Prepare yourselves. The Zelda game of the M4m4 channel. Let's start with the first thing you experience in Twilight Princess, Ordon Village. I hear a lot of people complain about the opening to this game, and for admittedly valid reasons. That being, it could take you almost 3 hours to complete, and the fact that you do some pretty mundane tasks. Personally, I think the opening gives off a really peaceful vibe. You start off as a farm boy Link, doing goat herding, fishing for fish, and raising up rupees to buy a slingshot so you can impress the kids. It actually reminds me quite a bit of Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life, because not only does that game have a little similarity in the art style and its realistic and desaturated textures, I guess, you also do a lot of farming, and the whole town you explore is sort of quiet and peaceful. I have a lot of memories with that game for some reason. I like Ordon Village in the beginning of Twilight Princess because it also reinforces how epic of an adventure the game soon becomes. I mean, Link starts off doing these boring and ordinary tasks, and then eventually goes on to find the Master Sword, defeat huge bosses, and try to save people from harm. It's really cool how it's set up, and makes for an interesting payoff. Anyways, after doing the stuff in the village, Link and his friends, including Ilia, get ambushed by Boblins. They all kidnap everyone except Link. As he encounters a strange dark wall that he gets sucked into, turns into a wolf, and meets Midna. Midna is an interesting partner you'll have throughout the game, and I will say I like her a lot. Mostly because of what happens later in the story, but at first, she's pretty mysterious and kind of cunning. We meet Zelda in Hyrule Castle, where she explains how Xanth, the king of Twilight, would take over the castle and force Zelda to surrender, making the entire kingdom covered in twilight and turning everyone into blue-looking spirits, hence why Hyrule Castle looks so different at this point. After this, Midna and Link decide to find the light spirits and revive them to return a part of the world back to normal, or a light world, and to also find the fused shadows in each of the first 3 dungeons. Once you're finished with the first Tears of Light mission, you turn back into a human Link. So yeah, the structure is pretty basic once you get it down. You explore an area in the Twilight Realm, meet the light spirit, do a Tears of Light quest, explore the area when it's back to normal, and then do a dungeon, and that's the same for each area in the first third of the game. I guess I should explain the Tears of Light missions first. What you do is Wolf Link. In your wolf form, you actually act pretty similar to how you control human Link. You can attack enemies by dashing into them and do a charged special move where you can kill enemies in a certain vicinity. I do like how agile Wolf Link is compared to human Link. Definitely makes exploring the Twilight Realm a bit easier. You can unlock the warp holder from defeating these Twilight enemies in a group too, and they let you warp to different places obviously. Human Link is what you expect though, but I do like how you can run and swing your sword non-stop like a maniac. A special part of Link's moveset is that he can learn hidden skills by singing with the Howling Stones and making a golden wolf appear on the map. You can learn special moves there, and they feel really good to pull off when fighting enemies, like rolling and doing an upper strike. The Helm Splitter lets you flip over your opponent, so overall, I really like the inclusion of these. And plus, you can't deny that when Link does that flippity whoosh thing with his sword, it's awesome. The combat in general is pretty bare bones, and the enemies have pretty easy attack cycles, but I didn't expect much from a Zelda game. Anyways, back to Tears of Light. You have to collect 15 of these things, and I've heard in the Wii U version they've lessened it down to 12, which I don't think that would make any actual difference. They're kind of similar to the Spirit Vessel missions in Skyward Sword in essence, but the Tears of Light take way longer to collect. The quests are something everyone either hates or is just like, I'm personally on the latter. I don't mind them at all, really. In fact, I think it's interesting to explore an area in the Twilight Realm. You could talk to the people there by using your sensibility in wolf form. They usually cower in fear. One time you even encounter the kids that were kidnapped at the start of the game, but you just can't do anything because Wolf Link is only in the Twilight Realm. Or you can see that Zora's trapped in the water, just all frozen, which is pretty unsettling. It adds a unique, darker atmosphere to Twilight Princess, which I absolutely love. Even though the Tears of Light quest can drag a little bit, there's only 3 of them in the entire game, so I didn't care that much. Once you do unlock the area in light form, you still have to do some exploring and stuff to get to the real dungeon. A lot of people say Twilight Princess shares many of the same tropes as Ocarina of Time. The structure is basically the same. You explore Kakariko Village, Lake Hylia, Castletown, and more. But it's the things you do and what happens in these areas that make it a lot more different in my opinion. And plus, would sharing similarities with one of the best Zelda games of all time be a bad thing? A Link Between Worlds, for example, literally copies the map from A Link to the Past, but Twilight Princess does not go that extreme. For instance, unlocking Goron Mines has you solving the dispute between the Gorons and humans in Kakariko by learning sumo wrestling. Unlocking Lakebed Temple has you trying to find Queen Rudala's lost kid. You soon find him unconscious in a bar where you also have to complete a pretty annoying horseplay mission, but I digress. There's even a moment where you have to save Cullen from the Bulblins later in the game. It involves you going at him on Epona at the Bridge of Eldin and swinging your sword like that just once. When you save an albeit pretty minor character, you still feel like a badass after that. One thing I also love is how the world is very connected. I love Mario Sunshine for that too. You can see landmarks in other areas from a huge distance. The same applies to Twilight Princess, and it's a great detail I didn't notice at first. There's always an area where you'll see Hyrule Castle from. Even more, the dungeon design is pretty different, but I'll cover that later in the video. Hyrule Field makes a comeback in Twilight Princess, and it's way more expansive than it ever was in Ocarina. You unlock more and more sections and areas to explore as you progress through the game. I will admit, it's very barren if you don't go hunting for secrets and heart pieces, but it has one of the best songs and renditions of Hyrule Field in the entire game, so that kind of makes up for it. It feels really nice to ride with your horse as it did in Ocarina 2. Although the first third of the game where you're looking for the fused shadows can be slow because of the giant Hyrule field you have to traverse. Going back and forth through different areas can be annoying a lot of the time, but using Epona can mitigate that tedium. Because that's before you get the ability to warp at any time. You can do it as Wolf Link during the Tears of Light quest, but yeah, I do wish you could unlock it sooner. Also, there appears to be no Sunsog from what I've seen, so if you have to get something, say a heart piece, and it only appears at night or day, you might as well just wait and stop playing the game for 5 minutes if you have nothing else to do and it's not at the right time. It isn't fun, but I honestly only had to do it a couple times, mostly in the first half of Twilight Princess. I also want to talk about the graphics for a second, where I hear everyone say they've aged poorly. Yeah, I can definitely see that with the side characters. Some of them look pretty ugly. A lot of them go for this goofy look, but some of them end up actually looking pretty unsettling and weirdly realistic. Aside from the characters, I honestly think this game holds up in the graphical department quite well. Sure, it's a bit desaturated, but it fits in with the darker themes and storytelling, obviously. The Twilight Realm looks so drastically different from anything else. It does a really good job at making you feel like you're in another dimension. There's a lot of moments where the graphics can shine in the real world too. As you're riding your horse in Hyrule and the sun sets down, it looks extremely nice. People also complain about the overuse of bloom or haze, but I also don't care about it as others may. The music also isn't orchestrated, but I do wish it was, like many others agree, though what's here adds so much to the most pivotal moments in the game, and its tone. After you recover all the fused shadows, the game doesn't stop there. There are 5 dungeons you still have left, and if you thought the first 3 dungeons and everything else of the first third of Twilight Princess was slow, you'll find that the game picks up its pace quite a bit. You explore new, albeit smaller and compact areas like the Snow Peak Mountains and Gerudo Valley. Sure, it's a bit weird how you have to do weird and unnecessary missions. One time you go fishing for some reason, and it's the only time you do other than in Ordon Village. However, the things the game requires you to do before City in the Sky is a bit annoying, I will admit that. It's essentially a drawn-out fetch quest. However, I don't mind it that much, since you storm a hidden village, fighting monsters like Cowboy Link with a great song, and it also involves Ilia. See, back when you go to Toma's bar to save the Zora kid, Link finds Ilia for the first time after she was kidnapped, only to realize she's lost her memory. Once Ilia remembers everything, it makes for a pretty heartwarming moment. What I don't like is that you have to find the 6 statues all around Hyrule and just move them with your Dominion Rod to recover the characters in your book. So yeah, this quest is clearly meant to pad out the game, which I don't really think was very necessary. Twilight Princess is a pretty meaty game. It took me around 30 hours to beat, and if you do more side quests and stuff, you could probably spend 40 hours on it in total. However, like I said, the pace does pick up quite a bit after you're done with Lakebed Temple, as you experience more of the dungeons. Speaking of which, probably the main reason I wanted to make this video was so I could talk about the dungeons, and for the most part, Twilight Princess has great dungeons. Goron Mines makes interesting use of the iron boots, letting you magnetize to walls and ceilings, letting you walk on them, which is the sickest thing ever. Too bad it's bogged down by how slow it is. Arbiter's Ground has a great atmosphere. You have to switch between Wolf Link and Human Link to do puzzles and find the Poe souls to progress. Even though you get the dungeon item pretty late, the spinner is still really fun to use anywhere else, and the boss fight is also cleverly designed. Stallard's first phase is pretty normal, but the second one has you using the spinner to switch between the walls and eventually hit him in the face. God, it is so fun, and is probably the best way they could have used a spinner in the game. The next dungeon, Snow Peak Ruins, is easily one of my favorites because it's a freaking mansion. That's why I love the Sandship in Skyward Sword for having a somewhat unconventional dungeon layout. The item you get is also really fun to use, and is probably the most underutilized item in the game, which is a bit sad. You can break ice by swinging the ball and chain, killing lots of enemies in your path, and the boss fight is pretty good too. Snow Peak Ruins even has a lot of charm, as you'll see with the characters Yetta and Yetto. The boss fight is against Yetta, and after you essentially save her, you get this adorable cutscenes where both the Yetis reunite and hearts fly out and even a heart container. Holy crap, this dungeon is so lovable unforgettable from start to finish. Temple of Time is the dungeon you do after that, and even though people seem to be mixed on it, I still like the concept of the Dominion's Rod, very similar to how you control the statues in the Tower of Gods and Wind Waker. I think the dungeon could have benefited from having more rooms and puzzles though. Basically you do one half of it in a linear progression, and then you just take the big statue all the way back to the first room. Granted, the puzzles are pretty good, but this makes Temple of Time a bit lackluster, and now I understand why people think it's drawn out. I still dig everything else though, including the atmosphere, and how you enter it is sick as well. You literally travel through time by walking through a door. I don't get why people hate City in the Sky. Do people complain that it's too hard or annoying? Personally, I love it. It's a floating ruined city in the sky. That alone should make you think twice about it. When you finally complete the long and arduous quest before it and shoot out of the cannon, hearing that music for the first time, the visuals, and landing in the pool of water, it almost gave me chills. City in the Sky has really good design in general, man. You obtain another claw shot. It's such a simple upgrade to your single claw shot from before, but it makes things so much cooler and complex. There's lots of puzzles where you have to claw shot to different areas, hang down from them really long, claw shot to another area as you're thousands of feet above the clouds. There's a puzzle where you stop a fan from spinning and have to hang all the way down into the room below to claw shot to a switch. Figuring that out was very satisfying. Sure, there's moments where you gotta wait on the spinning walls, which can suck, but I still love the double claw shot a lot. The boss fight too, while pretty easy, has a fucking fantastic atmosphere as the rain beats down and thunder strikes and you're at the very top of the city. It's windy and cloudy and it's all around amazing. So yeah, the dungeons are pretty awesome for the most part, and even with the ones I didn't mention, for example Lakebed Temple, they're still not bad, though Lakebed's aesthetic is boring and isn't that interesting in general. Also the boss sucks and the swimming is super slow. That aside, I'll say this: if a Zelda game succeeds at making fantastic dungeons, then it's a good game in my book. And Twilight Princess may as well have some of the best dungeons in the series. One thing I particularly notice is that there's no magic meter, and no items based around that. No fire arrows, ice arrows, or anything. But I still like how Link focuses way more on physical items, as it makes for lots of interesting and challenging puzzles. There were moments in the game where I had to think for a while in some of these rooms and put the pieces together. I see lots of people talk about how long the dungeons are, but in my opinion, they don't feel that long because they're just so nicely executed. Twilight Princess is still a pretty easy game. The bosses aren't hard, the combat isn't difficult to master, but it's still a fun ride. And that's what matters to me the most. So yeah, I covered basically all of the dungeons. Lastly, I'll go over the rest of the story. Spoilers incoming. Please play this game. Skip this section if you haven't. Right after you get the last few shadows, Zant finally meets Link and Midna in person, and takes away all of the fragments. It's here we truly realize how much Midna has a grudge on Zant. She accuses him for abusing the tribe's magic, and in return, she basically dies right then and there by being exposed to light. Meanwhile, Link is permanently bonded to his wolf form via Zant's power. After this, it's a journey to desperately find help from Zelda, alongside playing one of the most somber songs in the game, Midna's Lament. And yeah, it sucks it gets interrupted by the battle theme constantly, but this moment still hits. As Midna is left lying on Link's back, you really care for her survival at this point in the game. Exploring Castletown to find the secret passage to the castle is sort of interesting. Everyone there is scared of you even though you're Link. You try to go into Telma's bar, they immediately kick you out. It's probably the weakest Link has ever been in the entire game. At Hyrule Castle, Zelda essentially just sacrifices herself to restore Midna. We also learn that Link needs to find the Master Sword to remove its perpetual wolf curse. Then Hyrule Castle gets a magical barrier around it after they both leave. Going to the Sacred Grove and finally pulling the Master Sword out feels really good, as you're finally out of your curse, and you get a great upgrade to your sword. It's also when you can turn into Wolf Link at any time, which is really helpful. Midna then suggests looking for the Mirror of Twilight, something she sort of mentioned back at the castle. At Arbiter's Ground, we find out that the mirror has been shattered, making it impossible to go from Hyrule to the Twilight Realm. Apparently Zant had tried to destroy it completely, but only the true ruler of Twilight could actually do it. The mirror was also used to seal Ganondorf for his terrible crimes too, which this is the first mention of Ganon in the entire plot, kind of interesting. After getting all the shards of the mirror, we're expected to jump right in, but the sages then explain that Midna is actually the Twilight Princess. Basically, she rules the Twilight. In a flashback sequence, we learn that it was Xant that had made her have her current form, and now the true end goal is to get her previous body back. This is when the game lets you into what's known as the Shadow Palace, which is considered a full-fledged dungeon technically. If you wanted to be reminded of the darker tone that Twilight Princess has that other Zelda games don't, then the Shadow Palace should do the trick. Maybe you'll think of the weird emo cutscene with the wide-eyed Lynx and the scary floating Ilias, but the Shadow Palace has way more meaning. I can't even describe the feeling I have when playing through this dungeon. I guess it feels like you're nearing the end of the game. The atmosphere is fucking incredible, the music is very fitting, and even if the dungeon part is lackluster, getting the light ball back to the first area while the hand chases you and tries to give her back is pretty scary. It's a frantic time when you're panicking and trying to trigger the switch to get the stairs up as quickly as you can. Once you enter the boss room with Xant after you've upgraded your sword with the power of light, he finally reveals his true face, literally. We've had glimpses of it before back at Lake Hylia, but here he just goes insane and I love it. I love the boss fight against Xant. It literally combines aspects of almost every boss you've encountered throughout the game, and that you have to use the same items, and it's pretty cool, while also just not making you do a regular boss rush, which I really like. I also love the maniacal sounds Xant makes during the final phase, and how he just spins around and doesn't give a fuck about anything. Kind of sad to think about, as he's pathetically weak without the power from Ganon. It's a pretty wacky and derailing fight. After that, Midna finds out that she can only get her previous form back by killing Ganondorf and saving Zelda. Then she kills Gant by popping him like a balloon. At Hyrule Castle, to break the seal, Midna turns into a gargantuan monster that's very terrifying, but I think it reinforces her character development. She wants to break into Hyrule Castle and defeat Ganondorf so bad. It is so cool. It's here where you experience the last real dungeon, Hyrule Castle, which is pretty short compared to every other dungeon in the game. I always really like the cutscenes where you see everyone you knew back at Ordon Village come to help you one last time. You also encounter King Bulblin, the guy who temporarily kidnapped Colin, and after you're done fighting, he actually just forfeits and leaves. It's a pretty interesting moment as Midna exclaims that he actually spoke, and some somber words too. Anyways, the final boss, or should I say the final bosses, are really cool. You first have to fight Zelda, but as a puppet being controlled by Ganondorf, then him as a giant pig. After allegedly killing him, we find out he's still alive, and Midna decides to let Link and Zelda out of the danger, so she can find him herself. Ganondorf still comes out alive, and with Midna's helmet, and he crushes it, which is a really chilling cutscene as we don't know where Midna is at that moment, or if she's even alive. But after a horseback fight with Ganon later using Zelda's light arrows, it's time for a one-on-one sword fight. It's really cool aesthetically at least, but it's pretty easy honestly, though that doesn't mean it makes for a really epic showdown. You realize at this point, Link has come a really long way. He's gone through the depths of the Twilight Realm, retrieved a few shadows and mirror shards, and something about fighting Ganondorf in his humanized form, it's pretty intense. Compare this final fight to the very start of the game, the amount of contrast is unmatched. Everything about this moment is actually near perfection in my opinion. I fucking adore the ending too. When you finish Ganondorf off and stab him one last time, the game cold cuts it to this expression on his face as he's barely screaming his life out, with the Master Sword stuck in there as well. It feels nothing short but awesome. We then see Midna is still alive and also in her uncursed form. It's just a happy ending all around, I guess. So overall, I really think the story of Twilight Princess is one of the stronger parts of the game, especially Midna. She goes from just being devious and wanting to merely use Link as a means to an end. After some circumstances, she starts to care more about him and sort of lessens her hatred on Xant as she realizes that Ganondorf is the real villain here. It's simple when you sum it up that way, but I still really like Midna as a character. One thing I do think that could have been better about the plot is that I wish Ganondorf and Zelda had more of a role. We don't even see Ganondorf until you're finished with Arbiter's Ground, and when Zelda sacrifices herself, it just kinda goes on without her. I wish it wasn't made out to make her seem like she'd have a bigger role at the start of the game when you first meet her at Hyrule, but yeah, I don't think a fantastic story is needed in a Zelda game, but what Twilight Princess did here was pretty good, and I enjoyed it, even if the main storyline only comes up at very scarce moments. Twilight Princess is an adventure, not only in the player's perspective, but in Link's perspective too. The dungeons, the items, the areas you explore, and the final boss is also epic. Yes, it's epic. I could definitely see why some people out there consider this their favorite Zelda game of all time. To me, it's almost the Zelda game. You go through your familiar areas, Hyrule, Kakariko, Lake Hylia, as well as some of the very memorable dungeons, and eventually save Zelda and defeat Ganon. Sure, I'd say Ocarina of Time is also the Zelda game, but Twilight Princess comes close. I loved it quite a bit, man. So many people complain that the first third of the game is slow and inconsistent, and yeah, admittedly it clearly is, once I look back at how I spent 15 hours on it. But I am so willing to look over it. I don't mind the Tears of Light quest. The Ilia quest can be annoying, and Hyrule Field is very gargantuan and expansive that traversing it can be a drag sometimes. But in my opinion, those slow moments are a small fraction compared to the great moments. I'm talking about the excellent dungeon theming and design, the awesome physical based items, and just the darker atmosphere and storytelling was pretty awesome too. It makes for a good Zelda game. No, a great Zelda game actually. Playing Twilight Princess right after Skyward Sword made me realize how much better it is in almost every aspect. Skyward Sword seriously falls in the second half with its obvious time-consuming padding and useless side missions. I'd take having the first third of the game be kinda slow compared to having the second half being stupidly unnecessarily slow. If you have not played Twilight Princess yet and you're a die-hard Zelda fan, what are you doing with your life? If you have Zelda-themed bedsheets and have not played this game, please do so now. I'd really recommend going for the HD version. It's definitely worth $50 in my opinion, and I kind of regret playing through the original. Yes, I know that means touching a Wii U, but it's worth your time. Speaking of time, this is a long Zelda game. It took me 30 hours as I said before, but you can spend much longer on it if you want to, with all the side quests, heart pieces, and extra modes. Sorry I didn't cover any of that stuff in the actual review, I just didn't do any of the side quests really. And finally, I'll rank all of the 3D Zelda games in chronological order. First up, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Those go to the top for being great to this day. Wind Waker, I'll put below Ocarina of Time just for obvious reasons. Then Skyward Sword. Yeah, sorry, but it's the worst 3D Zelda game. Breath of the Wild, I'll put above Wind Waker. It's still pretty damn good. And Twilight Princess, where does that go? Just below Ocarina of Time. Heck, I might even switch them back and forth every month. Congratulations, Twilight Princess, you're better than 3 other Zelda games. So there you go, that's my definitive 3D Zelda ranking. Have a nice time looking at it, and enjoy the rest of your day. And go play Twilight Princess while you're at it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't played the game, I hope it made you want to. And if you have played the game, then I don't know what to say to that. Thank you for watching.
Alright boys, what's good y'all? Today we're here with a new countdown. We'll be counting down the top 3 Chef Pee Pee moments. Let's get right to it. Number 3 we have Chef Pee Pee raps. Pretty awesome. Number 2 we have Chef Pee Pee quits. And number 1, Chef Pee Pee Mario. Chef Pee Pee turns into Mario. Mario turns into Chef Pee Pee. It's a pretty exciting moment. Thanks for watching.